I remember exactly where I was when they laughed. It was a gray Thursday morning in mid-September, just after Labor Day, when everyone's ambitions feel a little emptier. We were clustered around the stainless steel breakroom table at Halcyon Marketing, my last corporate job, sipping tepid coffee, while James, our VP of sales, was telling me I was crazy. "You're starting over? Again?" He snorted, raising an eyebrow so high it nearly vanished under his salt and pepper hair. "At your age? With a mortgage? Maybe you should rethink your life choices." Behind him, Michelle from finance giggled and elbowed her husband, who skessed. Maria, our creative director, shook her head in faux sympathy. Even the office intern gave me a pitying glance, as though I'd announced I was quitting to juggle chainsaws in my spare time. I drew in a steadying breath and simply nodded. "Yes," I said, voice quiet but firm. "I'm starting over." A beat of silence, then the laughter rolled through the break room in low chuckles and snorts. One by one, they filed back to their desks, wiping tears from the corners of their eyes, maybe uncertain whether to feel shame or relief that I was the punchline and not them. That was the moment I knew I had to go. 6 weeks earlier, I'd sat in that same break room, fresh off the phone with HR, my heart in my throat as they explained the new corporate restructure, how my position was being consolidated, how they believed my skill set could be redeployed elsewhere, but they had no current openings aligned with my experience. In plain terms, "You're laid off, good luck out there." I thanked them politely, swallowed the lump in my throat, and walked out of the office building for the last time, the fluorescent break room light flickering behind me like a sad farewell. My mind was a whirlwind: the mortgage due in 2 weeks, the school tuition for my daughter Mia, the car loan, the credit card balance I'd been working on for years, all neat rows of dominoes teetering with the slightest breeze. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table, my 2-bedroom condo in a tangle of takeout boxes and unopened mail, while my husband Brian stared at my empty laptop case. "What are you going to do?" he asked, voice low. Mia, our 6-year-old, played quietly with her dolls in the corner. I rested my head in my hands. "I don't know," I admitted. "I have ideas, but nothing solid." In truth, the only plan I'd ever allowed myself was climbing the corporate ladder. Now that ladder lay in splinters on the floor. Brian reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out," he said. "You're resourceful," I nodded, bracing for a storm of doubt. But deep inside, something flickered, a stubborn ember that refused to be snuffed out. That ember caught fire the next morning, when I went for a walk in our neighborhood park, the chill of early fall tangling my hair. I watched joggers' breath plume in the air, pigeons bobbing on the path, and parents corralling toddlers on jungle gyms. I thought about what I wanted: stability, yes, but also work that felt meaningful, creative, and within my control. Could I build something that let me be both a mom and a provider, without answering to someone who could cut me loose with a corporate memo? I paused under a maple tree, reading the same line in my journal. How do I start over? Then I closed the notebook and made a decision. I'd start small. I'd start local. I'd start with what I knew: marketing and food. I'd always been the one at family gatherings dropping homemade brownies off at the kids' table, watching empty plates clatter in satisfaction. My surprise lemon lavender scones had a cult following among my neighbors. I once ran a weekend bake sale to raise money for the PTA and sold out in 2 hours. What if I turned that hobby into a business? What if I rented a tiny kitchen space, produced small batch pastries, and marketed them online? The idea made my pulse quicken. Back at the condo, I ordered a carafe of coffee and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Columns: recipe, cost, price, volume, marketing channel, legal requirements. I allocated a small slush fund from our savings, enough to cover 2 months' rent on a shared commercial kitchen and some basic permits. Then I Googled food truck commissary rental and home-based bakery license, until my eyes blurred. "Hey," Brian said, peeking around the door. He handed me 2 mugs, still plotting world domination. I laughed, a short, relieved sound, something like that. Within a week, I'd signed up for a commercial kitchen cop, 2 towns over, 3 days a week, early mornings. I bought a used industrial mixer on Craigslist, sampled tube pans at a restaurant supply store, and drafted a business plan in the margins of my journal. I dubbed myself Sweet Start Bakery, envisioned pastel pink packaging, and sketched a logo of a sunrise behind a loaf of bread. On evenings when Mia was at dance class, I fashioned my dining table into a makeshift marketing HQ, posting on Facebook neighborhood groups, crafting Instagram captions, offering a soft launch discount. My first customers were my neighbors. I delivered trays of assorted biscuits, They called them cookies at first, then nodded approvingly at biscuits, and watched their faces light up as they sampled rosemary sea, salt shortbread, and mini chocolate chunk pecan pies. They reposted photos, tagged friends, and by the second weekend, I had 10 orders. I spent Friday nights packaging boxes with ribbons, feeling the thrill of seeing my own logo printed on shipping labels. Meanwhile, my former coworkers at Halcyon Marketing logged onto LinkedIn to see my status update, excited to announce the launch of Sweet Start, small batch pastries with big smiles, DM for orders. The notifications pinged at odd hours. Congratulations, best of luck. A few skeptical comments. Good luck competing with established bakeries. Hope you have a backup plan. I ignored the naysayers. Each morning, when I preheated the ovens, one at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for scones, another at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for biscotti, I told myself, you're building this from scratch, and you'll determine your own success. By month's end, Sweet Start was more than a side hustle. It was a lifeline. I hired a couple of teens from Mia's school for packaging and delivery, paying them a fair wage. I set up a weekly farmer's market booth, bright teal canopy, hand-lettered chalkboard sign, where the line wound around the corner. I tracked orders in that same spreadsheet, watched costs shrink and profits grow. At 26, I'd never made more money in a single day than on that sunny Sunday when I sold out by noon and took in over $1,200. But the real validation came when I landed Sweet Start's first wholesale client, Maple and Ash, the trendy cafe chain downtown. Their owner, Carla, tried my lemon blueberry muffins on a whim and called me later. These are the best muffins I've ever tasted. I'd like to carry them across all 6 locations. Let's talk pricing. When I hung up her call, my hands shook so badly I spilled half my coffee. I sent a text to Brian. Carla wants a bulk order. His reply, a string of exclamation points and hearts, mirrored the explosion of hope in my chest. Suddenly, the breakroom laughter from Halcyon Marketing felt like a distant echo. Instead of gloomy glances, former colleagues sent me DMs. Hey, saw your bakery featured on the local news. Do you have any openings? We could talk on Instagram. I've always wanted to work flexible hours. Are you hiring? Others tagged me in articles. Top 5 female entrepreneurs to watch. How side hustles became main hustles. She quit corporate to bake her way to success. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond. The temptation to say, "Remember how you laughed at me?" danced in my mind. But I realized something: this was bigger than revenge. It was about the journey from that gawky breakroom moment to this, where I was the one with the waiting list, the one deciding how many interns I could train, the one negotiating contracts. I decided I would respond with grace. After all, one of my core values at Sweet Start was community. If former coworkers wanted a role in this new chapter, perhaps part-time marketing support, packaging design assistance, delivery coordination, I'd consider it. Of course, I'd set clear boundaries and fair wages, and maybe a probationary period. This was my business now. That evening, I was in the kitchen co-op, frosting the first batch of Maple and Ash's signature scones, when my phone buzzed with a video call from Michelle, the finance analyst who jeered at me back in the break room. "Melanie," she said, breathlessly. "I know this is last minute, but I just can't afford my rent this month. I saw you hired interns. Do you have any part-time openings? I have top skills, and I can do your books." She held up her corporate ID, eyelashes blinking behind fluorescent light shadows. I took a breath, wiped my buttercream, smudged hands on my apron, and smiled. "Michelle, you're very talented, but right now my priority is expanding production capacity. I do need someone to manage inventory data and customer feedback part-time, flexible hours. It's not a corporate desk job, but it pays $20 an hour. Would that work for you?" She paused, eyes shining. "Yes, absolutely, yes." She wiped a tear. "Thank you, Melanie." I closed the video, then shook my head in wonder. The world had flipped. The girl who once got canned for lack of bottom-line contribution was now in the driver's seat, literally writing her own job descriptions. I took a bite of warm scone and closed my eyes at the buttery sweetness. It wasn't just a pastry, it was proof that sometimes starting over means tasting success one small batch at a time. Later that night, I sat on our balcony, Mia curled in my lap, reading The Little Engine That Could. Brian joined us with 2 mugs of cocoa. He said, blowing on his mug. "You smell like vanilla and victory." I laughed. "I hired Michelle today." He nearly spit out his cocoa. "The same Michelle." I nodded, sipping cocoa. "She needed a job, and I needed her skills." I figure she can pay me back in spreadsheets and coffee runs. He hugged me from behind. You're amazing. I stroked Mia's hair. It feels amazing. And then I looked out at the city lights, thinking of all the people who doubted me, and all the ways I'd proven them wrong, because they laughed when I said I was starting over. But now they were asking me for a job, and I had the power to decide who joined the Sweet Start family, one perfectly baked opportunity at a time. And this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like riding an electric current, every moment crackling with possibility. Sweet Start Bakery wasn't just surviving, it was humming. Our weekly wholesale orders to Maple and Ash had doubled. Farmers market sales swelled into four-figure weekends, and Michelle, the once skeptical finance analyst, now wove through our commercial kitchen like a seasoned pros, gleefully reconciling invoices on her tablet as mixers whirred and the ovens pulsed with warmth. But the true turning point came on a muggy October morning, when I arrived at 6 a.m. to find a long line snaking down the block outside our tiny storefront on Elm Street. Word had spread, via Instagram stories, neighborhood listservs, and the mouth-to-mouth of delighted customers, about our new seasonal release, salted caramel apple hand pies with a hint of rosemary. I stuffed my grandmother's locket into my apron pocket and stepped out to greet them. "Morning, everyone," I called, voice steady as I popped open the door. The line erupted in cheers. I swear I saw Mrs. Patel, our next-door neighbor, standing in a bright red parka, bouncing on one foot in excitement. "You have no idea how far I walked for this," she said, clutching a reusable coffee cup with Sweet Start's Sunrise logo. "Worth every step." I laughed. "I'll keep baking them as long as you keep coming." Inside, the team moved like a dance troupe. Julia piping whipped cream rosettes, Marcus counting boxes, Michelle updating the ledger on her phone. All of us steeled by the adrenaline of a perfect launch. I took a deep breath and tapped the service bell. Time to open. By 6:30 a.m. The first pies were out, sold in minutes. Lines of pastry, smudged smiles stretched around the corner. And I realized Sweet Start had become more than just a business. It was scaffolding for community, a gathering point for friendly stranger and neighbor alike. That afternoon, I sat down at my laptop and drafted an email I'd been rehearsing for days, a pitch to a local venture fund that specialized in food industry startups. I'd shoved aside my old fears of corporate interference, reminding myself I wanted growth, but on my own terms. I attached our financials, profit margins, sales forecasts, license agreements, and a short video tour of our favorite kitchen moments. A perfect soufflé rise, a spilled bowl of flour turned into laughter, a teen named Carlos, doing his first perfect biscotti dip. I clicked send and exhaled. Whatever happened next, I'd shown up. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. "We'd love to meet with you. VC Gardens, 10 a Monday. Let's talk Series A." I let the message sink in, then texted Brian. "I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine." He replied almost instantly, "I'll join you on the porch." I ran upstairs, swapped apron for jeans, and joined him at the railing, where Mia was drawing chalk rainbows on the driveway. I poured 2 glasses of rosé, dry, crisp, optimistic, and leaned against Brian. "Series A," I whispered. "Can you believe it?" He slid his arm around my shoulders. I believed it from day one. He tapped his flute. "To you starting over and blowing the roof off." I clinked my glass and looked out at the house I'd nearly lost confidence in, standing firm in the twilight. Cheers to that. Monday morning found me in a glass-walled conference room at VC Gardens, across from 3 sharply dressed investors who flipped through my deck with polite interest. I laid out our origin story, corporate layoff to pop-up success, from kitchen call-up to brick and mortar, with highlights on margins that outpaced industry averages, brand loyalty metrics that soared well above competitors, and customer acquisition costs that dwindled to near zero thanks to word of mouth. I ended with my ask. We're seeking $750,000 for a 20% stake to expand our Elm Street location into 2 adjacent storefronts, one for a full cafe seating area, another for a retail mezzanine and baking classes. I paused, letting the morning light dance on my grandmother's locket as I spoke of community classes for underserved families, weekend Daddy's Dough Day events, and scholarship-funded summer pastry camps for local kids. Silence stretched. Then the lead investor, Ms. Chen, smiled. Your numbers are impeccable, but what really sells me is your vision. Sweet Start isn't just a bakery, it's a gathering place. She tapped her pen. I'll offer $750,000 for 15% equity with a $50,000 reserve to pilot your pastry camp scholarship program. She slid the term sheet across the table. I stared, heart racing. I'm honored, I said. Can we discuss the equity split? They leaned in, and 30 minutes later, we shook hands on the slightly modified offer of 18% equity, with the scholarship fund added in as a vesting milestone. I left the office floating, clutching the term sheet like a new mommy clutching her baby. By December, Sweet Start had a line of credit, a dedicated cafe space, and a calendar of baking classes filling up faster than I could advertise. I'd hired my first full-time pastry chef, an alum of Le Cordon Bleu, alongside a cafe manager, a barista trainer, and an events coordinator. Michelle had set up an automated inventory system that synced with our online store. The interns I'd once joked about hiring for coffee runs were now paid apprentices, learning business fundamentals as they dusted powdered sugar off their jeans. On a crisp morning before holiday rush hour, I walked the cafe floor, greeting guests by name. Morning, the Johnsons. Would you like your usual almond croissant? Hello, Mr. Ortiz. The peppermint loaf is fresh. The chandelier overhead was decked in pine garlands, fairy lights twinkling. I lingered at the window, watching the snow begin to fall outside. My phone buzzed with a message from James, my old VP at Halcyon. Congrats on the expansion. Sounds amazing. I'm looking for a new role. Any chance you're hiring in marketing? I smiled in the reflection of the window. I typed back, funny you should ask. Do you know Photoshop? And hit send. That evening, I hosted a winter warm-up event at the Cafe Hot Cocoa Bar, gingerbread decorating station, local choir singing carols. The place brimmed with families, couples, and the occasional teary-eyed former colleague who swore she'd never walked so far for a candy cane. Caramel-drizzled marshmallows melted on tongues, laughter echoed like church bells. I stood near the kitchen pass, watching Inez, my pastry chef, wheel out the final tray of Yule logs. Brian found me with 2 steaming mugs of peppermint mocha. Can I get an encore? He asked, raising his glass. I laughed and clinked mine to his. To starting over and to never stopping. He hugged me, nose grazing my hair. To Sweet Start, may it always feel like home. I pressed his hand to my cheek, eyes brimming with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, and without believing I could. Months later, I stepped onto a small stage in the same botanical garden where I'd once walked down the aisle alone. The community had invited me to speak at their annual Rise and Shine series for local entrepreneurs. Under a canopy of winter bare branches, with pastel Christmas lights woven through, I shared my story of being laid off, laughed at, and finding the courage to wake up every morning and bake another tray of cookies. I told them about the investors who believed in vision over veneers, about the team who became family, and about how laughter had transformed from a sting to a spotlight guiding me forward. When I finished, the crowd rose in applause, so thunderous it carried across the frozen lake beyond. I scanned the faces, friends, neighbors, the teens who once scooped frosting at my kitchen, even a few familiar figures from Halcyon, who gave me nods of respect. I closed with a challenge. If you ever doubt your own worth, remember the best time to start over is now. Your dream is out there, waiting. Dust off your apron, sharpen your pencils, and show the world what it looks like when you rise from the ashes. As I stepped down, the garden lights twinkled like fireflies, and I felt the sweet, warm glow of triumph. They had laughed when I said I was starting over, so I had risen, baked, grown, and now they were asking me for a job, or at least a role in the community I'd built. And for the first time, I truly believed that starting over could taste better than any victory ever imagined.